Whenever we have a problem in our lives, there is something to look at about ourselves. Even if the problem materialized, was made manifest by something outside us. Often there is something to look at having to do with mistakes that we had made overtly or mistakes that we had made passively. Maybe it was something that, if we're honest with ourselves, we can see, well, it's understandable that that consequence occurred as a result of my behavior. Or sometimes we have to say to ourselves, what were you even doing in the room? Why were you even that close to the possibility of disaster? Why were you that reckless? Why were you that irresponsible? Why were you that undermining of someone else or perhaps of yourself? Even if we can't find or can only find to some small degree to what extent we ourselves caused the problem, there is always the issue of who we have to be now in order for the problem to transform. Because the Course in Miracles, the very first line is, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. So the miracle is either that we recognize where the problem came from, we recognize the part that we played in the creation of the problem. As the Course in Miracles tells us, the law of cause and effect is unalterable. The universe will not support any effort to change on the level of effect if we don't change on the level of cause. And God himself will not change things on the level of effect if we're not willing to change on the level of cause. But the Holy Spirit, which is the thinking of God inside our minds, will work with us if we are willing, and if we invite the Holy Spirit, which, as the Course in Miracles says, responds fully to our slightest invitation, to change on the level of cause. We change on the level of cause by atoning for the mistake, recognizing that we made a mistake, taking full responsibility for the mistake, making an amends, and seeking to go forward as a different person. When we do that, the Course in Miracles says, the atonement principle literally undoes the consequences of the mistakes that we made, and we begin again on higher ground. Also, there's the issue of being who we need to be right now, so that we ourselves are a space of transformation. The universe always works on the side of the fostering of enlightenment. The fostering of enlightenment, whether it's for us as individuals or for any other aspect of reality. That is what all the spiritual traditions teach us. Now, what I just mentioned is as true of a nation, it is as true of a group of people as it is true of an individual, because all that a nation is a group of individuals. So everything that a country does is simply a reflection of the same principles that are at work when we work individually, except it's us acting together. And it was either us acting together, or there are many different ways in which a lot of people today are recognizing, well, I can't say that I perpetrated this or that, but if I was disengaged from the political process or whatever, I think a lot of people are waking up to the realization these days that not participating is participating. That if you don't participate, you're actually doing a favor to those whose views you probably agree with the least. So I think a lot of people are looking at a lot of things going on in the world today and recognizing that there are deeper principles at work than might meet the naked eye. And a lot of us, because we have been working on spiritual principles and spiritual transformation and seeing real miracles in our lives, are now ready to take these same principles and apply them to areas where it's not so much that you're concerned or you're concerned, but where we're concerned. Not so much where you're stuck, but where we're all stuck. And not so much where you're scared, but even areas where we're all scared. I remember on election night, we were all together here, and I did a Facebook Live that was seen by a lot of people, and I was talking about how we had to be open and see what would happen. And then I think what happened for millions of people was that watching led to genuine concern. And then for a lot of people, over the last few months, it's gone from concern to real fear. And, you know, during World War II and during the Depression and during the war, Franklin Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that was such a profound line, particularly for that time, because he was talking about the quality of personhood that Americans needed in order to get through this period, the quality of personhood that was necessary, that it's not always the issue, like I said in our personal lives when I was first talking, the issue isn't what happened to me. The issue is who was I that contributed to its happening, and who do I need to be now to transform it? So the question is never really ultimately about it, it's about us, because that's what the miracle comes from. There is no order of difficulty in miracles because there is no limit to how much we can change. The miracle is not that something happens on the outside. Something happening on the outside is the realm of effect. The miracle is a shift in perception from fear to love. So the miracle isn't that God's going to come and change things out there. Because the Course in Miracles says, everything that's happening out there, you made. But if you seek through atonement, through taking responsibility, which for this country would mean, to a great extent, through some deep thinking and a willingness to put aside some of the shallow preoccupations that we have allowed to dominate our culture for too long. And all of us need to look at that. From everything to do with if you spend enough time on the stupid TV shows, or enough time on the stupid websites, or enough time on the stupid movies. I mean, we all like escapism, but we've developed a culture of escapism. And we have, it's interesting when I'm in Europe, I don't think the average American realizes how different the news media is in Europe than it is here. The average European can watch an hour of TV news at night and really get a sense of what's going on in the world. You really do. It's unbelievable how much just being alive in most European countries, you really know what's going on in Africa, and you know what's going on in Asia. Here, all we ever hear about are either sensational disasters or just basic economic facts, because we are all brainwashed to think that's all we care about. But what Americans have, it's very interesting, every person has their talents, every person has their gifts, every person has their contributions, and so do various places in the world. And when I'm in Europe, first of all, the average European, there is an educational factor. There is a knowledge when you are in Europe. There's a realization that the average European, based on their education, based on their news media, just is more knowledgeable about what's going on. We're always taken up short when terrible disasters happen, because it's like, whoa, what happened? When really, if we had been looking, it's been happening for a while. Nothing that's happening that's a crisis in our democracy came out of nowhere. None of this came out of nowhere. So everything that's a problem has been accumulating. But what Americans have that Europeans don't necessarily have, because we're a younger country, so all this deeper thinking, more reflective thinking and realization of what's going on is partly a consequence of the fact they're an older civilization. But we have something else, and we have it in part because we're a younger civilization. We have chutzpah. And that means even though we often get there late, once we get there, we slam it like nobody's business. And so it could be argued that America right now is waking up and everybody's going, whoa, wait, what's happening? But it's extremely important who we are at this moment of, hey, wait, what's happening? And this goes back to Franklin Roosevelt saying, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that's why it's so important for us right now to look at what's happening and to know what it would take to create a miracle. Too many of our material circumstances have been sewn up by some genuinely unloving forces. Too many institutional levees, which we assumed, which we were brought up to assume, and which most generations have assumed would not break, because they were grounded enough in democratic values, democratic principles, and humanitarian values and principles. Levees have broken which we did not expect to see break. There are institutions that have been infected, as it were, democratic institutions that have now been infected by undemocratic forces. Institutions which we thought held together a certain kind of order in Western civilization that are crumbling before our eyes. Now, as I said before, it's not so much that we need the money, or we need the technology, or we need the business, or we need the governmental forces on our side. So let's look at this from a metaphysical perspective. The abolitionists did not have the money, and the abolitionists did not have the technology, and the abolitionists did not have business, and for a long time, until they had the North, they did not have government on their side. And neither did the suffragettes, and neither did the civil rights movement. So you start with that. And by the way, one of the things which enables us, not only in our deepest thinking, but also in our most hopeful thinking, an issue which is very, very serious and which I think is part of the problem to begin with. Only some states in the United States even require a half a year of American history. Many, many states in this country only require half a year. Only a few states require a full year. And there are some states that require no education about American history or government. This was purposeful, and this is dangerous. If you don't learn what the Bill of Rights are, you don't know to be outraged when they're under assault. If you don't know how things are supposed to work in a free democratic society, you are too easily bamboozled by those who pretend that it's democracy at work, when if you had learned about what democracy is supposed to be when you were a child, you would go, I know it's not. I've told the story many times about when I said to a friend of mine years ago, why aren't kids learning? Why aren't these kids saying the Pledge of Allegiance? Because when I was a kid, we said the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, one God, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My friend started screaming, because there is no fucking liberty and justice for all in America. And I remember saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. But when I was a child, I put my hand over my heart when I was just a little girl. One nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. That turned me into a woman who gets kind of pissed when I see it not happening. So it was important that I took that pledge. It wasn't a guarantee, it was a pledge. We are pledging allegiance to that idea. That doesn't mean you can just take it for granted. That doesn't mean it's just given to you, it's bequeathed, and then you get all upset at other generations because they didn't do it all right. If we have a real knowledge of American history, we know, yes, it's true, some Americans didn't do it all right, but some Americans, a lot of Americans, made right that which was not right. How are we doing on that? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. Yes, we've had plenty of problems in our country, plenty of mistakes, plenty of anti-democratic forces we have had to push back. From slavery to the oppression of women to institutionalized white supremacy and segregation. Yes, we've had terrible things in this country. But let us not just identify with the problems, let's identify with the problem solvers. This is not the first time in American history, ladies and gentlemen, that we've had to push back on seriously anti-democratic forces. Let's just not be the first generation to wimp out on doing what it takes to get this country back on track. And that has to do with what Franklin Roosevelt was talking about. Who are we? The question at a certain point is not who is Donald Trump. The question at a certain point is not who is Mitch McConnell. The question is at a certain point is not who the Democrats are or the Republicans. The question is, who are we? You know, there was a lot of talk during, and that's because, I want to stay with this for a moment, who are we, meaning, are we becoming the people that we need to be to handle the problem? If you have had your entire sense of power displaced onto the external world, then this is a very scary time. But it's only a scary time if you think the power is in the external world. You want to remember what Martin Luther King said. He said, we have a power in us more powerful than the power of bullets. The abolitionists did not have the external power. The suffragettes did not have the external power. The civil rights movement did not have the external power. They had internal power, which gave them what Martin Luther King called cosmic companionship. They had the better idea. And so they had what you would call the angels on their side. The Course in Miracles says angels are thoughts of God. The Course in Miracles says we are on this earth to think the way God thinks. So when our thoughts are aligned with spirit, literally the mind expands. Now you want to really follow what the Course is saying here. The Course says a miracle is an intercession on behalf of our holiness from a thought system beyond our own. You know, when you read about really great people, particularly like the Lincolns or like the Martin Luther Kings or like the Roosevelts, people who've made extraordinary difference. One of the things that, they write about in sociological books is, well, did the person make the times or did the times create the person? It is kind of interesting, like what if the South had not been fighting the North? Would Lincoln have become a great person? I mean, this is kind of an interesting question. But the issue is that no matter what the times are, because we're not living in an age where the issue is, will this great person arise or this great person arise? That's not the zeitgeist of this time, and that's not the spiritual lesson of the 21st century. It's not about what you become or what I become. It's about what we become as a human race. So anytime there's a saying in AA, every problem comes bearing its own solution. So you look at this with your own life, or you look at this with the nation, and you say, okay, who do I have to be to handle this? That's the question. I went through a very, very terrible time once in my life, and I realized that I didn't have to get over it. But I could see down a tunnel of who I would be and what my life would be if I didn't get over it. It was just pathetic. It would be a lot of, too bad about Marianne. It would be a lot of just kind of like, whatever, it was so horrible to think. And I was a young woman at the time, so I knew, is that where you're going to take your life? And so the decision, the willingness, and it was in my life, it was because of the Course in Miracles and this kind of thing, that I realized the issue was not what had happened to me. The issue is who I was going to be. And so there's a decision not about who somebody else chooses to be. If somebody else is indecent, you be decent. If somebody else lacks honor, you be honorable. If somebody else is dishonest, you be honest. And so the issue is, what are we going to practice? Because if we have enough people, the abolitionists didn't start with the majority. The suffragettes didn't start with the majority. The civil rights movement wasn't the majority. The majority doesn't wake up one day and go, let's free the slaves, shall we? That's not the way society changes. It changes not on that horizontal level. It changes on the vertical level. Enough people go deep. Enough people go real. Doesn't matter that not everybody understands. We are too involved and obsessed these days by how many clicks and how big your platform. One other person who gets it. One other person who gets it. Two or more gathered in the name of something real and important. The Course in Miracles says an idea grows stronger when it is shared. So the issue isn't to dumb down your message so more people agree with you. The issue is to go as deep as you can with what you know is true. And that gives you an intellectual rigor, it gives you an emotional rigor, it gives you a psychological rigor, and it gives you a spiritual rigor. When the Israelites, when God sent Moses, because all biblical stories, all great spiritual stories are messages from God to us. That's what all the great religious stories are. So the Israelites were enslaved, and slavery in Egypt, the Israelites enslaved in Egypt, Jesus on the cross. These are symbols of the worst things that can happen on the material plane. So God sends Moses. So Moses is an aspect of who we are. And that aspect of who we are says to God exactly what Moses said to God, which is, I stutter, he said. And God said, well, yeah, it's true, but your brother will talk for you when you need. And he not only did Moses feel too weak, Moses had actually killed a man. Moses was not someone, when he had seen the slave driver beating a slave, he killed him. And that's why he had to run away to begin with. So this is not about perfect people. That's another thing that you really get from reading history and from reading biographies. The people who have shown up in their times and risen to the occasion and saved their families or their communities or their countries were no different than we are. But we have to get over thinking we need enough people to agree with us, and we need to get over this thought that we will get to it later. There is no more later. There is no more later. The Course in Miracles says there is a limit beyond which the Son of God cannot miscreate. The issue becomes to show up now. You don't say, I'll do it when I'm perfect, because there's a profound alchemy to the way God works with us. Nobody who's done great things except the great avatars were perfect. You give to God your weaknesses, you give to God your strengths. You give to God your failures, you give to God your successes. And I know in my own life, I've learned as much from my failures as I've learned from my successes. And I see how it's an interesting thing about your weaknesses. Because when you're aligned with truth, then in the areas where you're weak, you know what happens? You attract people who are strong in the areas where you're weak. I see it all the time in my life. I see in my life where if I'm about the right stuff I should be about, then in the areas where I don't quite understand that, somebody will just come into my life. I understand that part, Marianne. I'll drive on that stretch of the road. I know what to do there. It's an amazing thing. The more you show up for people with your strength when they lack it, the more you'll find other people showing up for you with their strength in the places where you lack it. Now, God told Moses that everything he wanted him to do, he would provide him the means to do it. Now, the line in the Course in Miracles is it reasonable to assume I would give you a job to do and then not provide the means of its accomplishment? If love demands it, no, there's a way to accomplish it. You know, too often we say, oh, I think I should do this. And then somebody says, how would you do that? And you go, oh, you're right, I can't. The question is not how you're going to do something. The question is it what Spirit would have you do? And that's what I mean about Americans right now. We need to stop with the shallow thinking and have the deep thinking. So many of us have taken so much for granted. We haven't asked ourselves, well, you know, it reminds me of that last scene in Miss Congeniality where Sandra Bullock says, I really do care about world peace. You know, she poo-pooed all this stuff. Actually, I really do. I think a lot of people are feeling that now. It's like, actually, I think democracy matters to me. Too many American women haven't even stopped to think for how many years, if ever, about the fact that not in every country can you wear what you want. Not in every country can you leave the house unaccompanied by a male relative. The freedoms we have, that we're like a bunch of spoiled brats and just take for granted. But that I think now everybody's going, whoa, whoa, whoa. We are realizing that this is important. Way more important than the things that we were taught to think were important, because we've been trained to think that all that's important is me getting what I want. Like that's the mountaintop. And we even have within the so-called spiritual, although there's nothing spiritual about it, the so-called higher consciousness, although there's nothing higher consciousness about it, communities, basically acting like the higher spiritual mountaintop is you can manifest what you want. Hitler manifested what he wanted. The highest spiritual mountaintop is not that you manifest what you want. The highest spiritual mountaintop is that our lives are so much bigger than ourselves. It's so much bigger than what I want. The highest mountaintop for Moses didn't get to Mount Sinai because he thought, you know, I'd like to walk up. He was there on a mission. God sent him to save his people. Now, God gave Moses a rod. It was a snake that he was scared of. He said, pick it up by the tail. He picked it up by the tail. It turned into a rod. Now, that rod is a very important symbol. It's the same as the wizard's, what do you call wizards? Wand, wizard's wand. And the wizard's wand, or the Moses rod, which is disciplined thought. Remember what I said a few minutes ago? Don't go by the vertical, go by the discipline. It's like the straight spine, right? The kundalini coming up. So when you have that straight thought, that thought which is one with God, then you have a power That is your power. Your power is righteous thought. Remember, the word righteous, right use of the mind. When we're thinking with God, and the purpose of our lives, the Course says, is to think with God, then we have a power. And the paradox is that the way to have power on the horizontal plane is to shore up your power on the vertical. In both Judaism and in Christianity, the symbols are the intersection of the 2 points. So there's the triangle in the Star of David, the triangle leading to God intersects with the triangle leading to the earth, and of course the cross the same way. The way to have power on the earth is to know that you don't come from here. So your power on the earth plane comes from a kind of non-attachment to the earth plane that comes from knowing this is just your headquarters for now. That's all that the body is. It's a suit of clothes. This is not where you come from, and you are on this earth to reclaim the ethers of the earth, the Course says, for the regions of heaven, which is an awareness of our oneness, which is a state of consciousness, okay? So Moses was given this rod. You and I have it too. That's what prayer gives us. That's what meditation gives us. Meditation and prayer and spiritual practice are how we align the mind with the thinking of God. Now remember what I said from the Course, that not a prayer, although the Course says prayer is the medium of this miracle, but that the miracle itself is an intercession from a thought system beyond our own. So the more you meditate and the more you pray, you shore up your power that's not of this earth. You shore up your power. So you wake up in the morning, you go directly to the computer, the phone, the TV, the newspaper, you just give it all away. It just leaks out of you, particularly today, because you see all these things happening on the earth plane that are genuinely disturbing, okay? And we're being assaulted with it all day, every day. Shore up your power, and shore up your power in the morning. I don't know of any spiritual or religious system that does not talk about the power of the morning, because that's when your mind first downloads, takes it all in. If you give all your power to the worldly happenings in the morning, then you're going to be depressed by noon and feel completely at the effect of what's happening. And you will feel that it has mastery over you. You shore up your power, you pick up your rod. That's what you do by prayer and meditation. Pick up your rod. Then Moses goes. So then what happens is, first of all, God says, look, I'm going to send somebody. That's what the message of Moses is. The Israelites were slaves. God sends somebody. And who has God sent? You. God knows there's a problem. He sent somebody. He sent you. This is a co-creative thing we're doing here, right? So then you say, okay. So then you say, well, who am I? Who am I to do it? And God says, I'm going to send you everybody that you need. And he says, I'm going to give you this rod. Your rod is what you achieve not only through prayer and meditation, but also through your willingness to practice these principles. You know, I've been reading The Course in Miracles so many years, and I know a lot of us are in this place. Every time I make a big mistake in my life, or even a little mistake, it's really painful. You look at yourself and you go, I knew that. It's like the issue at a certain point, these principles are not difficult, he says in the Course, they're different. What's difficult is getting over our resistance to practicing them. Because truth is simple, but life is complicated. So we have to really practice. We have to be serious with each other right now. We need to coddle our neuroses less. We need to coddle our wounds less. My gosh, what have we done? This woundology, and some of this came from our community, the higher consciousness community. Everybody's so enamored of their woundedness. And you know what I learned in my life? And that's what I learned first that time when I thought, yeah, you can live out your wound. You can make this wound your calling card for the rest of your life, Marianne. You know what it will make you? Pathetic. We all have wounds. That doesn't mean you have to act out of your wound. That's what makes a person powerful sometimes. Do you think everybody who ever did anything incredible, or even who you know now, who is doing incredible things, you think they don't have problems? Or everybody's talking about their trauma this year? First of all, you're late to notice, but our entire civilization has been a rolling trauma for a long time. So just the fact that it's news to you, you know what I'm saying? My trauma, it's our trauma. And when you realize that this is a rolling trauma, just the way we have designed our civilization, and that so many people on the planet every day live within. You think, though, that we have time for anybody to get over their trauma work before you show up for your country? You think the people on the bridge at Selma weren't traumatized? They didn't know if they were going to bring the hoses out, the dogs out, the bullets out. You think they weren't traumatized? You think the women suffragettes who were thrown into jail and were put in these metal vices to force feed them weren't stressed, anxious, and traumatized? What has happened to us that we're so soft? And American women particularly, we are not porcelain dolls. We do not break. And love knows how to say no. Love knows how to say stop right there. And love knows how to be fierce when love needs to be fierce. Now, when we use our rod, the thing in the Bible, read these stories. When Moses was able to hold his rod up, that's what happened. First thing that happened, the Israelites are on their way out. They're finally on their way out. And then they get in front of the Red Sea. And about that time, Pharaoh decided he wanted his slaves back. He sent his army out to get the Israelites and bring them back to Egypt. So, stuck between a rock and a hard place. If you go straight into the Red Sea, you will drown. If you go back, the soldiers will capture you. If you fight them, they will kill you, or they will take you back to slavery. What happened? God told Moses to lift his rod above the water, and the Red Sea parted. What's the message there? That when you lift your rod high, you literally have the power over the laws of time and space. That's why we don't have to be afraid right now, because business has power, and technology has power, and government has power, and money has power, but they do not have miraculous power. You, however, have miraculous power. Miraculous power is a power that emanates from the mind, but only the mind when it has aligned with God. And that's why, as a nation, we have to do what we have to do as individuals. That's why when you're getting sober, let's say in AA, you have a lot of stuff to do that has nothing to do with alcohol. It's cleaning up your life. In my book, Tears to Triumph, talking about the Course in Miracles, when we go through traumas and crises, and I talk about it in terms of Buddha's message and the Old Testament and the New Testament. This country has to get right with God. That's why we have to admit some things that so many of our leaders don't want us to admit. It's this corporate, don't complain and don't explain, because even the ones who know about it are afraid that it will depress you if they're honest about it. But you know what happens when you don't look at things that maybe would depress a deep person? You're going to create situations that'll make you really depressed. It's like the universe. Some parents who say, don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about. So what has happened now is there's so many things we have not looked at, and so we need to look at them now. That's why another aspect of all that, of course, that we talk about a lot is the horror of the fact that we have medicalized human despair. If you are looking, sometimes the fact that we're sad means that you're mentally healthy. The fact that what's happening in America today, if you're not depressed by what's happening, who are you? So sometimes the fact that you're upset, the fact that you're depressed is a sign of mental health. Doesn't mean the absence of mental health. Mental health does not mean happy, happy, happy all the time. We've taken a cheap yellow smiley face and we put it on top of everything as though that's mental health. You know what we used to call that? We used to call it Stepford, the Stepford wife, the Stepford, and we used to avoid it. Now people put it up almost like that's the goal. Just be happy all the time. Be okay. No, don't be okay when things are not okay. It has taken millions of years of evolution for us to have the finely tuned psychic and intuitional powers that we have. Whenever you have something really wrong, one time I went through a very terrible situation in my life where I was assaulted, attacked, and anybody who's had this situation knows it's like every cell in my body woke up. Every cell, every cell in my, I had cells wake up, I had eyes wake up, I didn't even know I had eyes. I had ears I didn't even know I had. Every part of me knew. And that's what we have now. We have the capacity to stand up, to rise to the occasion in this moment. The problem in America and the problem in the world today, because what I see when I travel particularly, you know, my daughter lives in London, so I go to London fairly often. But when an American goes to Britain, and I am sure when a Brit goes to America also, it's like going to your first cousin's house. You know, because it's so clearly that, you know, it's we're the same trunk of the same tree. But when you go to other countries, sometimes it's so amazing to see some of the differences. And just like the Course in Miracles says, do not look to yourself to find yourself, because that is not where you are. You find yourself in relation to other people, and nations find themselves in relation to other nations. That's another problem we have in America, partly exacerbated by the fact that our media does not talk to us enough about other countries. Not enough Americans have exposure to people in other countries. So we have this view of this America-centric thing that's simply because we haven't been exposed to enough of the other. When we are exposed, we see that things are happening now that are not just about what's happening in America. Even the political forces that we need to be concerned about in America are not just happening in America. The things to be concerned about are happening everywhere. And the answer with a capital A is happening in everyone. The Course in Miracles says you think you have many different problems, but you really only have one, and that is your separation from God. And the answer is not, what's the answer about immigration? What's the answer about the election? What's the answer about this or that? The issue is, what is the answer with a capital A? Who do we have to become? That is the lesson of this moment. Who do we have to become? And we have to become people who take the wheel. Take the wheel. You know, we're also fascinated by the Titanic. Why are we fascinated by the Titanic? We're fascinated by the Titanic not only because it's, although horrifying incident, it was a fascinating incident, and not just because it was a good movie. It's because it speaks to some archetype that we all can recognize, including recognizing that we're on the Titanic. It's like the entire human race is headed for the iceberg. The iceberg could take the form of biomedical, biochemical, weather catastrophe, nuclear catastrophe. But what happened in the actual story of the Titanic? Well, the captain of the ship said we should not go that far north and we should not gun the engines. We do not have enough lifeboats. He knew that. And he said it to the owner of the company, and the owner of the company shouted him down, and then the captain just gave up. He went downstairs into his cabin, he went to sleep, and by the time they awoke him, it was too late for him to save the ship. Don't go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. That's the message for us. Refuse to go to sleep. Go up there now and take the wheel. When we do that, we have some things that are very painful to look at, but that we must look at, including the fact that we have all acquiesced to a basic organizing principle of our civilization, which is economic rather than humanitarian. We've all bought into it to some extent, that the bottom line is money rather than the bottom line is love. It's not like a lot of this is news, and a lot of this is news to you because it wasn't in your neighborhood, or it's news because the way those forces operate, the forces that are the most to be concerned about know that Americans are decent people. And that's the thing. If we see somebody suffering in front of us, we care. They've known that for a long time. So they made sure the suffering that was the consequence of the behavior that they got you to buy into for their economic purposes, they made sure that any suffering that resulted was either on the other side of town or on the other side of the world, so convenient not to look at. You know, when I say what I just said, I see in this room what I see every time that I say that. I see a lot of people nodding their heads, and that's okay. That's okay. None of us are perfect, and none of us got it all right about anything. But I think we're all realizing now that you can't just blame other generations or blame what other presidents did or blame what this one is doing. At a certain point, it's going to be the consciousness among enough of us. You know, Americans are very good with a to-do list. Just tell us what to do. Tell me what to do and I can fix it. It's not that simple this time. This is not like World War II, where, well, we got to get the Nazis, or we got to get the Japanese Imperial Army, which could be likened to an operable tumor. So we got to go out there and we got to surgically remove the tumor, which was brilliantly done by another generation. This is more like a cancer that is metastasized, and it's behind some healthy organs, and it's real complicated. And you can't just go in there and try to excise it, because if you do that, sometimes you start cutting out things that you don't want to cut out. So, once again, what is the miracle? The miracle in the Course in Miracles is not where it says, don't worry, I'm sending someone. That's not what the Course in Miracles says is the salvation of the world. The salvation of the world that the Course in Miracles talks about is what it calls the plan for the teachers of God. And the teacher of God comes from all religions and no religions. It is those who have heard the call. Many are called, but few are chosen, which is a line we've all heard before. The Course in Miracles means everyone is called, but few care to listen. So the issue is not that we're going to get through this because somebody's going to rise up and fix it. That's not going to happen. We're going to get through this because of a change that happens inside the consciousness, not just of Americans, but people all over the world. People all over the world who are sensing something in the 21st century. Even though we're in the 21st century, at least in this country, we're still running things like we're in the 20th century. Not so much in terms of some businesses, not so much in terms of all education, not in terms of health, but in terms of the way we order our society, sociologically, economically, and politically. And it was a beastly organizing principle. Beastly in that it has nothing to do with putting love first and everything to do with putting money first, which, by the way, isn't even good economics. All it has done is to produce a situation where a few are very rich, nobody else hardly can even have a chance to be. Whereas if you ran everything just saying, let's love, then you would make your children, particularly children under 8, have every possible thing they could possibly have. You would love people enough to give people the opportunity to soar. And that's where money comes from. That's where productivity comes from. That's where creativity comes from. It's really time for the American people to realize the level on which we have been scammed. The level on which we've been scammed. The level on which maybe some people really thought it was the best thing to say market forces should run everything. Maybe they honestly, some of them thought at the time it would be a good idea. But it has taken us to where we are. And the entire human race is now having to see what all of us see when we are at a crisis in our lives. What am I being shown? And then you have a choice whether or not to change. The Catholics say you go to confession. The Jews say you atone on Yom Kippur. AA talks about a program of amends and having to take a brutally honest look at yourself. Enough of us can do this. It's not like you have to wait till the government will do it, or you have to wait till somebody that you think of as more powerful than you. And when we are willing to do that, when we are willing to say, I just want to be used as part of the solution, because I used to say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. To the extent to which we say in our prayers in the morning, dear God, use me, then what happens is that we become what the Course in Miracles calls the teachers of God. To teach in the Course in Miracles is to demonstrate. And then each of us will do the part that we're supposed to do. Somebody's going to be interested in organic agriculture and new kinds of building and new kinds of things with the land, new kinds of, soil sequestration and carbon sequestration, all the things going on. Some people are going to be assigned to animals. Some people are going to be assigned to education. Some people are going to be assigned to sciences. Your dharma. You'll know what you're assigned to because that's where your passion lies. I remember the time my friend of mine said to me, Marianne, I don't know all this, surrendering my career to God. I'm a scientist. I'm a musician. She said, I'm a musician. What if God wants me to be an accountant? I remember saying to her, why would he do that? You suck at math. Why would he want you to be an accountant? The fact that you can sing like you can sing is kind of a clue. Whatever you're brilliant at. But this is the thing. There is a term. It's not in the Course in Miracles. It's a traditional Christian term. But it's quite fascinating. It's called the gifts of the Holy Spirit. It's when you give your life to God, something happens. You get just a little bit smarter. You get just a little bit more talented. You get a little bit more wise. You get a little bit better at stuff. Like I remember reading an article once about all these people. Some of them were famous people. I remember the actress Deborah Winger. People who had been in comas, and they came out of the coma, and they had talents and abilities that they hadn't had before. I can't remember what it was with Deborah Winger, but I think it was maybe she'd been hit by a horse or something, and she came out and said, I'm going to be an actress. And she'd never acted. And then she became, obviously, one of our greatest actresses. But there were all kinds of stories like that, where it's like you get kicked in the side of the head, something terrible happens, and you emerge from it, and you know things, and you can do things. When in my own life, when I had this terrible thing happen when I was a very young woman, I felt that my head exploded into the outer space, and it took a while for my skull to come back. But when it did, I felt there was something in there that hadn't been there before. So the fact you go through traumas, and I've had other crises like that, the fact you go through a trauma, that's why you don't want to stay with this woundology. You know, there are 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection, not 9 days. 40 years in the desert, not 100 years in the desert. So at a certain, we need to stop asking, oh, how awful was it? How awful was it? How awful was it? And get more used to saying to each other, and what'd you learn from it? How are you even better now? How are you more compassionate now? How are you more humble now? How are you more grateful now? And that's where this country has to be. How are we going to be better from this? Because let me tell you something. If we don't get better, we won't make it through this. And if on the other side of this we're not better, we will just manifest it again. Now, what are you supposed to do? I have no idea. God's not going to tell me what you're supposed to do, any more than God's going to tell you what I'm supposed to do. But you know in your heart. And not only that, that thing that you know is your special gift, that image that you can't quite get out of your mind. You might be held back by the thought, but how would I? We don't have to worry, how would I? You just worry about whether or not to say yes. Remember, is it reasonable to assume, he says, that I would give you a job to do and then not provide the means of its accomplishment? God's power is not more available to you or to you or to you or to me or to anyone else, any more than the sun shines on anyone more than anyone else. How much, to what extent God works through you is not about whether or not God likes you. How much and to what extent and how God works through you has to do with your receptivity and your availability. And that's what Moses had. He said, yes. And then you have to wake up in the morning and say, use me. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say and to whom? And the Course in Miracles says that you will find that sometimes the Holy Spirit says things to you that are rather startling. And you'll say, what? So many times people say, well, I don't know what God is telling me. When really you know exactly what God is telling you. You're just freaked out by what God is telling you. Or you don't really like what God is telling you. Or you find yourself saying to God, you know, I heard what you said. But I don't think you get the whole picture. So I'm going to wait, maybe ask again in a couple weeks. But the Course in Miracles says the Holy Spirit knows the future as well as the past and the present. So all of this is to say, ladies and gentlemen, that even though I know sometimes, particularly right now, some of the news is disturbing. I think, you know, from a Course in Miracles perspective, somebody said to me on Twitter the other night, I can't believe you're a Course in Miracles teacher. You say you teach the Course in Miracles and you're making all this illusion real. And I said, you know, there are so many people talking the Course in Miracles who I would swear my life have not read past the first page. The first page said, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, herein lies the peace of God. And then there are about 600 pages after that, where it explains in full. The Course in Miracles says, of course this world is not an illusion. We are not to ignore the illusion. We are here to transform the illusion. That this world is the manifestation of a bad dream. The Course in Miracles says in the Bible, it says that Adam fell asleep, but nowhere does it say that he woke up. There has not been a mass awakening, the Course in Miracles says, but we are here to initiate one. The world is now, it's nightmarish. It's already nightmarish for many people. And for most of us now, there's some bad dream quality to this. We don't get to just awaken, ladies and gentlemen. The Course in Miracles says first, we must transform it to a happy dream. Children not suffering needlessly, no one's suffering needlessly. World's working more, The issue is not just, everybody's our trade. The issue is not just that we compete, although competing in a healthy way is good. We need to move as a human civilization beyond competition to cooperation, and beyond that to co-creation. The Dalai Lama said that, I think it was the Dalai Lama who said himself, or that someone had said to him, I think he said a British physicist said to him, that every nation should see every other nation as a domestic partner. That we can co-create the good, the true, and the beautiful. That's what life could be. It's about more than just making money. It's about making beautiful things, and culture, and upliftment, and music, and philosophy, and art, and dancing, and children, and falling in love. We've been lured into this mindset which is so destructive and so not of life. But we heal in life one aha at a time. You heal one aha at a time, and civilization heals one person aha at a time. It's about our own awakening. And sometimes awakening is painful because we have to go, oh my God, who have I been? And who has my country been? And it makes you sick. That's good. That's not bad despair. That's a moment of despair that's healthy. Only a sociopath feels no remorse. The Course in Miracles says that when we come into an awakening, that there is a level of discomfort that is temporarily aroused. It's called conscience. That we, like I said, none of this came out of nowhere. And then we awaken. And we make the prayer, use me. And then God does use us. And how he'll use you, I don't know. How he'll use you, I don't know. Politics is one big use together. And there will be an awakening. And there is a term in sociology called the local discontinuity of progress. And I love this one because it talks about how sometimes the greatest points of power come from the last place you would expect it. Like nothing ever good, came out of Nazareth, that was what he's saying. The Jews, it's interesting about the Jews, nobody knows exactly, just this group of people who came out of the desert. Who were they? What was that? You never can point. Another one was the founding of the United States. These people in these colonies, it's the last place anybody expected anything good and powerful to be coming from. Well, I know. I've traveled enough. And I was saying to people all week in Europe, I was saying, we know how you're looking at us right now, but we really need your prayers and your goodwill to help us through this more than criticism, and I felt that very heard. I'm going to tell you with a real miracle, and it's a miracle that's going to happen. The people of the United States, who, although in our history have done incredible things, are seen by so many people on the planet right now like, who are you people? What are you thinking? You have been so spoiled. You have been taking so much for granted. You've been so entitled. You've used so much of the world's resources. We're the last people that we're going to look at this point in history and think you're going to lead us forward. I'll tell you the miracles that's going to happen. Is that enough Americans that will wake up and go, we've done it before and we're going to do it again. We're close to the cliff, but we're not over the cliff. It's the 11th hour, but it's not midnight yet. And as I say to them when I'm overseas, and I've said to you enough times, we are slow to get it sometimes, but we slam it like nobody's business once we do. Because once our minds are awakened to any extent, where we humble ourselves and we are willing to look at our own mistakes, both as individuals and as a country, and be willing to make amends. That's why I think we should pay reparations for slavery and so forth. There are just some things we need to do to continue with the process of reconciliation. We just need to see where some things have to be done. Some things have to go forward. We have to get real. We have to get deep. We have to not be childish. Women have to stop being little girls. Men have to stop being little boys. People who are wounded have to stop over-identifying with our wounds. You know what happens, ladies and gentlemen. We need to pray very hard. And we need to love very deep, and we need to kick ass. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. The story of the prodigal son in the Bible, of course, is that the father was more excited to see the son who left and came back than to see the son who had never left. And there are many ways which sometimes when we have to look at ourselves, we feel a lot of disgust and self-disgust. But it's very important that we remember miracles derive from love. Miracles occur, the Course in Miracles says, automatically as expressions of love. A problem we have in this country, and it really concerns me with young people, a lot of young people, young Americans, don't love America right now. And they don't love America. They have a lot of emotional ambivalence about America because in a way that is positive, they see the mistakes that we have made, they've seen the mistakes we are making, but weren't informed, apparently, educationally enough about all the good things we've done too. But more than that, need to see us making things right. So that's why we have to do some things to really change things so that we can get back to our love. So when when a doctor looks at a wound, the doctor doesn't say, ugh, that's gross. And that's how we should look at the wounds of this country. Where people are bad, it's not where we're bad, it's where we're wounded. And where a country is bad, consider it a wound. And you're not here just to slap it. You're a citizen, fix it. That's the thing. I see some people just so angry at America. Well, fix it. You're the citizen now. Other generations might have gotten it wrong. Well, you fixed it. So as we work these things out, I think part of what we are praying is a realignment of our own sense of citizenship. When I was in Europe last week, it's so incredible the way the Course in Miracles says all relationships are assignments. The cells are assigned to the lungs, or assigned to the pancreas, or assigned to the heart. And in the world, you're assigned to the arts, you're assigned to education, you're assigned to science. And you're assigned to Russia, you're assigned to Africa, you're assigned to Asia, you're assigned to Europe, you're assigned to the Americas. And it's so exciting to see the rejuvenation that's happening. And I remember saying to the Irish, you take care of Ireland, somebody else, you take care of Switzerland, you take care of Germany, you take care of Spain, we'll try to take care of the United States. Something so profound is going on. This upliftment that has nothing to do with any particular place or any particular ethnicity or culture. It's coming up from the bottom of things for the human race. People are picking it up in the Arab world, in the Middle East, that you see in Israel and the Palestinians. The real answer there is not going to come from a new place for the Green Line or the checkpoints or the settlements. It's not on that level. It's on the level of the heart. And there are enough Palestinians and Israelis. I have met these people. This is where the real solutions are. This is what's happening. And this is how those who have assigned, what's the assignment? It's such an amazing assignment to be born a Palestinian. It's such an amazing assignment to be born an Israeli. Such an amazing assignment to be born wherever we are. But wherever we are, our assignment is to rise to the occasion of what we're being called to, exactly where we are, not someplace else. But we have to drop thinking like, well, can I have what I want? No. Ask how you can serve, and everything that you could possibly want will fall at your feet. So this is the time where we go into our own temple, which is within us. That's where the altar is. Remember that when you're in a room full of people who are praying together, it's very difficult to lie to yourself. So really hear yourself in a situation like this. Also remember that all the Holy Spirit works through your own subconscious. So all the answers, a lot of times we hear, well, the answers are within. Yeah, the answers are within, but we have withered ears. It's not just they have eyes but do not see, it's they have ears but do not hear. So at a time like this, let's deeply listen to ourselves. Let's take a deep breath and close our eyes. Having closed our outer eye, we open to the light which is within. For here within is all the light and all the love, and God Himself. Closer than our breath. Our true selves, the Spirit of God that lives in us. And now we surrender and devote and place upon the altar of God within our minds all the unimportant things we have allowed to dominate our lives. The small and petty grievances, the self-centered goals, the efforts to control, the laziness and procrastination, our unkindness to others, the issues we know we should deal with, but we haven't dealt with, the ways we have been wasting our lives. And now we consider that life is so important. And we really do want to participate. Love is so important. And we really do want to love. Freedom is so important. And we really do want to tend to it and bequeath it to our children. Our country is so important. And it needs us. We really do want to be there. And we face in this moment, we're aware in this moment, we have gotten in the habit of not showing up, not rising to the occasion, playing small, giving in to weakness, seeing ourselves as victim, obsessing about the past, obsessing about the future. We see all the ways we have learned to be immature. We have learned to act small. And in this moment, we devote ourselves to God Himself. Dear God, lift us up from the ruins of our shattered past. Where we have been weak, please make us strong. We give to you our failures and we give to you our success. We give to you our past and we give to you our future. Make us who you would have us be, that we might do as you would have us do. Let us be neither falsely humble nor arrogant. For on this night we remember that you, dear God, live in us. We ask only to be shown what you would have us do and where you would have us go. We ask to be shown what you would have us say and to whom. We know whatever task you have for us, dear God, mighty companions have been assigned to walk with us and to serve with us. We place in your hands our country, whatever country we live in. And we pray to be used in service of its repair. We place in your hands our precious earth, and we ask to be used in service to its repair. We place in your hands our entire world, every single problem, ways that you know, dear God, things that you know that we could never know. But we know that you know, dear God, how our talents could be of use to you, how our abilities could be of use to you, how who we are, what we've been through, how we might be of use to you. That is our prayer. That love use us. Heal our minds, dear God, of the thought that you wouldn't want to. Heal our minds of the thoughts that we are incapable. Heal ourselves of all those things which obstruct our view of your love and your power in us. And to that, dear God, we add only one thing. As we remember that your power lies in us, may we remember that it lies in everyone else as well. When we remember that beyond our mistakes is the innocence in which we were created and shall always be, help us to remember that that is true of everyone else as well. Help us to see the innocence in each other, that we might feel the innocence in ourselves. Help us to be generous to others, that we might be generous to ourselves. And may we thus be reborn in spirit, entering into the present, having placed our past in your hands. Change our minds that we might see that only the love we gave was real, the love we received was real, nothing else exists. And knowing that where there is love, miracles occur naturally. We ask only that our lives be instruments of love, that we too might work miracles. And we know that we will be joined with mighty companions. And the world shall yet rise. May the world be healed. And may it be healed through us. For we shall be who we have not been. And we shall see what we have not seen. And we shall hear what we have not heard. And we shall know what we have not known. All because on this night we pray to love as we have not loved. Opening our hearts, opening our souls, dear God, please enter here where you already abide, that we might know you more. And so it is. Together, we say, Amen.